My name's Christopher Stapleton, and I'm from the Virtual World Society. I'm a co-founder with Tom Furness, who's the grandfather of VR. He's been in the business for 50 years, one of the original inventors. I've only been in VR and AR for 25 years. But one of the things that we're doing with our society is looking beyond the technology and marketplaces and looking at the people and ideas and looking at this society where today we're going to be starting to interact with the virtual native, those who are born in this period. Those are right about now toddler age, and we're going to be able to kind of look at what that is in the future and build that society together. And one of the areas that we're working with is a community of practices. And one community of practice we're looking at is story explorers, looking at the power of stories and how they work with our brain differently than how computers work and where to take stories to the frontier. How VR and AR are going to influence story and how story are going to influence VR. And so they're very much connected. And these stories or explorers here are 4 of them, I'm included, in taking it beyond entertainment and beyond education. I'm coming from the perspective of entertainment, going into education, training, and therapy. And one of the areas that we're really starting to discover new things about stories is in therapy. We work with communicative disorders and really looking at people and telling stories beyond words. We're working with Valentino, who's taking virtual reality into hospitals with kids with cancer to really kind of go beyond the walls of their confinement and be able to free their spirit and their imagination, even though they are confined with illness. Anastasia is looking at parenting, looking at technology with parenting in mind and bringing up this virtual native that we're going to be discovering. And then Navid is going to look at sound and stories that are looking in the aspect of medical imaging. Now, these are different ways to tell stories. So in therapy, I'm looking at stories to engaging life. Valentino is looking at caregiving and having to ignite spirits with stories. Anastasia is looking at guiding lives as a parent and bringing it up. And then Navid is looking at stories and making meaning with medical imaging. Because medical imaging is not data. It's a story. It's a story that communicates doctor with patient and makes this connection. Because stories go beyond just entertaining and amusing us. They connect, they have a human connection, social engagement, and exercise of the imagination, which this day and age, coming into this century, we need more exercise of our imagination, not necessarily with the physical world. And so I'm going to start off in talking about a little bit of what I do. We understand the virtuality continuum, but this is just one linear aspect of these virtual worlds that we get into. You have the reality and virtual reality, but stories are central in the language of VR, and I want to talk to you about why that is. First of all, we have the imagination, which is the third reality that connects the real and the virtual. Virtual and real are external stimuli. Where it brings meaning is in the imagination, with our dreams, our memories, our mental models, our situational awareness models. That is where we have consciousness. And that's the reality that rules all reality, is what I call the imaginality. And this imaginality continuum is in opposition of the virtuality continuum to what is sensed versus what is perceived. And this is a big difference. And I come from the area of illusion and magic and theme parks, but going into therapy and training in highly kind of tense areas. And so what we have is we have this interaction between story, game, and play, which are the 3 aspects of entertainment being applied not for entertainment's sake, but not as an end, but as a means to connect up for that human connection, social engagement, and exercising imagination. And it's how our brain works. Before entertainment, before technology, before language and civilization, we had story and play and game and how we interact as humans. And this is very basic and plays that out. So it's not just gamification. And what I'm doing in this area of story exploration, we're going into real-world laboratories, real places of communities of need, and to see how can stories transform lives. We have an open perspective on what that is. And we look at that process, and we're looking at aphasia, which is the loss of language due to a stroke, and being able to how they can work with embodied cognition, facial expression, all these different rivers of communication to overcome that. And the virtuality has been able to be a bridge between the limitations of the physical world in the limitness of their imagination. And we've been adding it and working it across the continuum of virtuality in transforming an entire practice of therapy in that way. And what's interesting is that the space industry took a look at it and realized this is helping them come out of isolation with aphasia. We're also looking at astronauts and helping them with their isolation. So we start with one thing from aphasia, go all the way to astronauts in deep space exploration, and we're finding out stories can make all new connections in transforming our lives. I'm going to pass it on to Going Beyond Walls, and where Valentino is going to introduce himself and look at his exploration.
Hello to all. I'm Valentino Megale, and I'm the CEO of a company, a startup created this year that is called Softcare Studios. What we are doing is bringing immersive technologies to help patients during therapy in hospitals. And why we are here today all together is because we believe that stories and storytelling is beyond only a cultural importance. Because stories, since the beginning, just like games, have been a way to play with reality, a way to prototype our actions and reactions towards people, life, challenges. And we can think also that virtual reality today is a modern and tech iteration of such an ancient solution, ancient process. Just like storytelling, virtual reality starts from our mind and starts from the possibility to have psychosomatic effects on our body using a specific set of audio-visual stimuli. And virtual reality adds something, because virtual reality makes the storytelling more immersive than ever, just like dreams, but maintaining the user conscious and awake. And at the same time, virtual reality gives the opportunity to the patients, to the users, to face their problems consciously and at the same time safely. And that's the reason why we decided to introduce immersive technologies in the hospitals, because they have the possibility to immerse people in other realities and support them during the extreme conditions they face during therapy. We started to use them with children, especially children with cancer. And if we just take into account children, for children, gaming, playing, and also stories are the natural way to define their personality and also to define their world, the environment. But when the disease disrupts their world, destroys their routines, the same games, the same stories became a natural reaction, became a natural way to cope with trauma and also to go beyond their extreme situation. What we are doing is learning from this natural reaction, just translating it into virtual reality, because in the last months we worked a lot with children, with parents, with physicians, because we believe that users are the best designers. They only speak another language. They speak a language of fears, of desires, of dreams that technicians have to translate and convert into technical solutions adapted to their needs. And what we saw in the hospital is how much children are surrounded by walls. The walls made of anxiety, made of fear, made of pain, the walls of their bodies that are affected by the disease, the walls of their hospital rooms. And what children want is go beyond these walls, is to regain the control of their life, but they need help. They need to be supported. And through immersive technologies, we can support them. We can let them believe again in their life. Let them believe that they can build something without losing it in a while. And what we learned in the last months, in the last year, are 3 key points. The importance of sharing, because for everybody, sharing is very important. Beautiful things becomes more beautiful, but when we share bad things, The bad things becomes easier to control, to manage, and also to change. So difficult situations are called impossible when we are alone, but when we are together and when we share them, they become solvable. So it's very important to provide virtual reality experiences that are based on sharing, multiplayer, on sharing experiences and time with their parents, with other children. But another important thing is the immersivity, that's to say the distraction from the real life, from the real problem. Because children have to focus their energy on something else, or something better from their real problems. And next, the control on their life. Thanks to interaction in virtual reality, we can offer them the opportunity to have, again, the control of their skills, goals, and achieve milestones. And the final goal of all this work is basically motivation. Motivation is the basic tool that helps every patient to go beyond their situation. But children are not the only patients during such a therapy. There are only parents, and parents are affected by the disease. They are attacked by the disease. They are stressed, and the stress of the parents are the stress of their children. So there are other people who are working to support parents, just like Anastasia, Miron.
Thank you very much. Is it working? Yeah? Perfect. So thank you for having us here, and thank you for being here. I'm going to talk a little bit about stories told by parents to their children and how they impact their lives. As parents, we are superheroes and we are role models to our children. We don't really think about that much. We don't give it enough thought. So parenthood is extremely difficult. It takes a village to raise a child when there is no village. Very often in our modern world, there is tech. So we're going to explore how technology can empower us parents. Parenthood is messy. It's not always as we imagine it. Sometimes, you know, it can be a little bit pumped up in our heads. We imagine it differently than it is. This is a total fake. It's 1 second. When the picture was taken, we have no clue what happened before, what's going to happen after. But that can be a representative image of how we imagine parenthood. It's not like that. It looks mostly like this. You know, you have to clean it up and still try to have a good day. After that, sometimes it looks like that. Just in case you're wondering, it's not chocolate. And sometimes it starts you like that, when you less expect it. But don't despair. I'm going to figure it out. So parenthood is challenging, extremely rewarding at the same time. We are parents 24/7. It's a full-time, unpaid job, right? Yes, but it's a job. So why don't we prepare properly for this job? We don't have institutions that are preparing us for this job. To become a doctor, you have to go to school, you have to go get the degree and 12 years of, you know, preparation. Then, only then, you are allowed to practice this job. Parents don't prepare for that. We hope that the nurturing instinct, the beautiful instinct that we have, yes, it's true, will help us to be parents. Wrong, because we are not allowed to be nurses or doctors based on our beautiful nurturing instinct. Is that right? We're not. So why is that with parenthood? Why I say we're superheroes? Because it's challenging, and every moment you have to come up with a solution to a problem. Sometimes we don't even imagine the problem we're going to have, but it's going to be there, a tantrum, or, you know, I wanted my child to be here, but he started yelling out of excitement. I'm like, oh! So it's continuously something. This is a very, very complex chart that explains how we should approach the communication and the storytelling we're having with their kids. It's written by Lori Petro, a very impressive woman. She works with kids. She's been doing that for years. So what I do, I transform all of these difficult connecting words, stores, powers over criticism, judgment, I transform it in a VR application that helps us parents to have this immersive experience, go through it, be a little bit challenged in the process, and then actually learn how to communicate. Because when a doctor tells us a good news or a bad news, he comes or she comes prepared with specific words. He is trying to be very empathic, very accurate of the words they're using. We as parents tell stories of life, stories of love, stories of deep feelings to our children. We teach them courage, we teach them compassion. Sometimes, unfortunately, we teach them hate as well. But here is the storytelling in VR, but makes it easier for us to understand what kind of words, because words do matter, what kind of words in which situations we must use. When to say no, when to set boundaries, when to just let it go and accept. And again, parenthood is messy. I'm going to pass the estafette to my colleague that lives in a mess. That's what he says. And he's going to take it from there. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, talking about messes, I do love messes because I don't want to oversimplify complicated situations or wicked problems of the world into our models of it. But I'm in Munich right now to work with the Computer-Aided Medical Procedures Lab at Technical University of Munich, where they're doing augmented reality for surgical environments. And I'm here to look at possibilities of removing distractions that might be visually hard to integrate into your cognitive field if you want to be connected to the tissue you're performing on, by adding other forms of sonic and sonification that are easier to embody. So then if someone snaps there, you know, like, okay, you already know that it happened before your visual field could integrate such a thing. Which then this slide shows that. So for example, during an eye surgery, you have, they're trying to integrate notions of depth and tissue deformation, but it's hard to integrate into the cognitive field. So then I'm trying to ask, could we put the surgeon's ear at the tip of their tool? And answering such a question is not, you can use scientific methodology, design, philosophy, or art. You need to really think of them as ones, reversing, you know, the damage that European modernism has done by separating us in our disciplines, and go back to holistic alchemical thinking. And that's what I do as a media artist. I create whole, dense, palpable environments to allow for co-expression between different performers. And when I say performers, I mean humans, non-humans, sand, and but by not modeling that from an interaction design perspective, the sand gets to acquire an expressive force as well as the human. I do engage in vision-driven design at the Topological Media Lab. That's opposed to need-driven design or technology-driven design. So, you know, instead of starting with a technology and finding applications for it, or with people's needs, which could last 5 to 6 or 10 years or 20, vision-driven design could last a century, while also acknowledging the other two. So the kind of vision that I have as an interaction designer and as an artist and designer of the worlds we live in, I want to imagine a world where we're able to live with the computational and non-human agencies as in a way that doesn't separate us from the fibers of the universe. So the same way that the sand castle, to build one at a beach, you don't need to use a user manual, so should our computational systems, whether you're in a surgery room or you're a dancer in a contemporary piece. So we're moving from technologies of representation to technology of performance and enchantment. And this kind of thinking would need a holistic shift from objects to fields of matter in process, from nouns to verbs, or from stories to collective apparatuses for meaning making. Coming from the field of topology, for example, I think of a whirlpool. The whirlpool is not an object, it's a field of processes coming together. It's a core expression of a lot of agencies. and I take my design from goats and objects. So this was a really brilliant example of interaction design for me, because this piece of metal does not have to assume what is an intentional gesture, who is the storyteller, and what is the story being told. It simply enables a situation for co-expression, and as opposed to a synthesizer or airports, we're constantly log-casting to modes of cognitive decoding. And I take this sort of thinking to scenography design for example, a concert on an enchanted chef, where he's cooking a meal. He gets to express himself as a human, but the expression is in the enchanted materiality about how you apply vibration to a table. Now technically is enchanted with machine learning and so forth. Your gestures are charged with potential for storytelling. So while designers could orchestrate this, the performers could improvise. I'll let this play for 30 seconds. So here is grinding spices, but maybe he's working with a synthesizer, so he's composing poetry as he goes. And here's another speculative design about a future where, for example, your water you could liquidify your voice, and instead of working with computational algorithms, if you wanted to compose with your water or with your liquidified voice, you could simply boil it or splash it to make rhythms and use all sorts of temporalities. Since time is short, I will move on. In all of these examples, we have players discovering that they can charge their everyday actions and gestures, players being, again, as well non-humans, with potential for improvised play and storytelling. So how can we take that to the surgical rooms? It happens so that some of these problems are very much the same. It's the same way that the musician that would be using a synthesizer has enabled a lot of potentials for sonic production, but they're detached from the resonating medium. So if you're a musician on a classical guitar, for example, simply by changing the angle of your nail, you have a whole new timbral possibility and a whole new instrument. And the doctors feel the same. There's a richness going on gesturally and materially, and technologies often distract us. But yet in the surgical room, there's little control, haptic feedback if you're doing a non-invasive surgery on an eye, and this is what me and Chris were doing yesterday. So we need to put these together, and the way I'm approaching this is to go through, do this by sound, but not in a representational way, but by putting us, connecting us with what I call behavioral resonance, where the fibers of your body already could process the type of sound. So for example, if I take this and do this sort of gesture on this carpet, your body, before your brain could process it, you acquired the materiality and the texture. So how can we do that and put the doctor's ear at the tip of his tool? If you give me 30 seconds, I close. Please, don't worry. Yeah, that's all right, okay. So then this becomes interaction design as a mode of storytelling. So if the surgeon's ear is at the tip of his tool, this seems like a complicated metaphor, a story to tell, but it takes a lot of careful sonification where the doctor feels like they're navigating a sonic environment while it being aesthetically pleasing, but providing information. So, for example, imagine you're walking with your friend in a forest. They're speaking to you about some intense story. There's music playing. You can hear the river coming up. There's wind blowing in the trees. And as all of this sonic information is unfolding, you hear some rustling of the leaves that are just slightly too localized to belong to the wind. So immediately your brain zooms in, or your ear zooms in, and hears something that's a little bit more scratchy, and by the speed of its movement concludes that this is a squirrel moving on a tree You move on, this took 1 second, and meanwhile, you were stepping on a leaf, and you knew there was mud under it by the way it felt. So how can we bring this embodied behavioral resonance into the surgical room in a way that feels like the doctors are navigating the world and making their own meanings without us assuming how they should do it through representational systems? So anyways, that's how science, art, and humanities could come together. Sorry for
There's a lot he can say, and please contact all of these because there's a body of work that's so powerful and important. And one of the important things is that this is a community of practice we're looking at to really look at story, because right now, media drives experience, but from now on, particularly with the virtual native, experience will drive media. And what's really important is that there are big frontiers to explore, and we hope to invite you into the Virtual World Society so that we can work with them together. We have a global interaction with people like on stage here to really understand what we have in ahead. And what's really important about story is it's not just artists, it's not just writers. It is looking at all the disciplines working together. Science and art are two sides of the same coin. One might be the truth that reveals a lie, but art is the lie that reveals our truths. And everything has a double side, and they need to work together. And there's no better way to go in the real world with real world problems to see what powerful transformation stories can have. And that's what the Virtual World Society is working on, is looking at real-world laboratories to look at the community of need, the innovation play tank, to be able to start to play together, communicate together, and have a conversation, which is the storyteller, the story listener, and they taking turns to create that story conversation. And then creative collaboratories to kind of bring new ideas of stories to new applications, but also an accelerator to kind of turn these into products, to bring them back to the community of needs and bring innovation to those who need it most. And so I appreciate you coming and listening to us because we have a lot of a future to behold. And thank you everybody for joining us, who are all bringing new products to market in this way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.